Welcome to the Empower El podcast. I'm your host, Vero, and I'm so excited to have you join me on this journey of empowerment and growth. This podcast is designed for ambitious, high-achieving women who are ready to break free from overwhelm and step into their power. Together, we'll explore practical strategies, share inspiring stories, and hear from experts who can help you navigate the challenges of balancing ambition and well-being. Whether you're looking to cultivate confidence, transform your mindset, enhance your leadership skills, or find harmony in your life, this is the place for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Empower El podcast. I'm so glad that you're here to learn about something that could shift the way you lead and live. Today's conversation is all about living an integrated life. So take a deep breath and let's dive in. I want to start today's conversation with a question. When was the last time you truly felt balanced? Not just productive, not just successful, not just checking things off your to-do list, but genuinely balanced. A lot of women pause when I ask this question. Some laugh, some sigh, and some immediately tell me balance doesn't exist. Maybe you've said that before. Maybe you've heard someone say that work-life balance is a myth. And honestly, I understand why people feel that way. For years, I was one of them. I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to. I worked really hard in school. I earned my CPA designation. I climbed the corporate ladder. I stepped into leadership roles. I checked all the boxes that society tells us should make us feel successful. And from the outside, everything looked great. But on the inside, it was a different story. I was overwhelmed, I was anxious, and I was exhausted. I felt like I was constantly trying to keep up with the demands of work, family, responsibilities, expectations, and the pressure I put on myself. And if I'm being honest, there were many days when I felt like I was barely holding it all together. I would wake up already feeling behind. My mind would immediately jump to my to-do list. I was thinking about work before my feet even hit the floor. I was constantly focused on what needed to happen next. The next meeting, the next deadline, the next goal, the next achievement. I was always moving, always striving, always doing. But I wasn't really living. I wasn't connected to myself. I wasn't connected to what I truly wanted. I was simply surviving a life that looked successful. And maybe that's where you find yourself today. Maybe you're achieving great things. Maybe you're leading a team, building a career, running a business, raising a family, and supporting everyone around you. And yet somewhere deep down, you're wondering, why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would? Why am I still exhausted? Why do I feel like I'm constantly juggling? And why do I feel guilty no matter what I choose? If that's you, I want you to know something. You're not failing. The problem isn't you. The problem is the definition of balance we've been taught. Because most of us grew up believing that balance meant giving equal time and attention to every area of our lives. We've imagined some perfect scenario where work, relationships, wellness, personal growth, family, and everything else would somehow fit neatly into a perfectly well-organized schedule. We thought if we could just manage our time better, we would finally feel balanced. If we could just get more organized. If we could just become more productive. If we could just work a little harder. Then we'd finally arrive at this magical destination called balance. But that's not how life works. Life is not static. Life changes. Our priorities shift. Different seasons require different things from us. And that's why I don't love the word balance. At Empower L, I prefer the idea of an integrated life. Because integration isn't about making everything equal. It's about making everything work together. And that distinction changes everything. An integrated life recognizes that you're a whole person. You're not a professional at work and a completely different person at home. You're not a leader in one area and someone else in another. You are one person carrying multiple roles, responsibilities, dreams, and priorities. And when those areas are aligned with your values, life feels very different. You feel more grounded, more intentional, more energized, more fulfilled. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is connected. One of the biggest mindset shifts that I had to make was realizing that success and well-being are not opposites. For years, I believed they were. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, I believed that success required sacrifice. I believed long hours proved commitment. I believed that exhaustion was a badge of honor. And I believed stress was simply the price of achievement. And unfortunately, that's a message many ambitious women receive. We celebrate hustle. We praise busyness. We admire people who seem to do it all. And somewhere along the way, many of us learn that our worth is tied to our productivity. We start measuring ourselves by how much we accomplish, how much we give, how much we achieve, how much we can handle. But here's what I eventually learned. Achievement without alignment does not create fulfillment. You can accomplish every goal on your list and still feel empty. You can receive promotions, recognition, and praise and still feel disconnected. You can build a life that looks impressive from the outside while feeling exhausted on the inside. Because fulfillment, it's not created by achievement alone. Fulfillment comes from alignment. It comes from knowing who you are, knowing what matters to you, and making choices that reflect those values. One of the reasons so many women feel overwhelmed is because they're trying to live according to someone else's definition of success. Maybe it's society's definition. Maybe it's your family's expectations. Maybe it's what you've always believed you should want. But if your goals aren't aligned with your values, eventually you'll feel the disconnect. It's like using a map that belongs to someone else. You might move quickly, you might work incredibly hard, but you're still heading toward a destination that doesn't actually belong to you. And that's why clarity matters so much. Before we can create an integrated life, we have to understand what we're integrating around. And the answer isn't your schedule. It's your values. Your values are the foundation. They are your compass. They help you determine what deserves your time, energy, attention, and focus. Without values, everything feels urgent. Without values, every opportunity looks important. Without values, saying no feels impossible. But when you're clear on what matters most, decision-making becomes easier. Not easy, but easier. Because you're no longer trying to do everything. You're focusing on the things that align with the life you actually want to build. And that is where integration begins. Now, let's talk about what an integrated life actually looks like. Because this can sound like a really nice concept, but what does it mean in practice? When I think about an integrated life, I think about 5 key areas: your career and leadership, your wellness, your relationships, your personal growth, and your joy. Now notice I didn't say work-life balance, because work is only one piece of your life. And yet, for many ambitious women, work becomes the center of everything. I've seen it happen countless times. A woman starts her career with excitement and ambition. She wants to make an impact. She wants to contribute. She wants to grow. And those are wonderful things. But over time, without realizing it, her identity becomes tied to achievement. The goals get bigger. The responsibilities increase. The expectations grow. And eventually, work starts consuming more and more space. At first, it feels manageable. Then suddenly, wellness gets pushed aside. Exercise becomes inconsistent. Sleep becomes negotiable. Healthy habits disappear. Then relationships start receiving whatever energy is left over. Then hobbies disappear. Then rest feels unproductive. Then joy becomes something you'll get back to later. And before long, your entire life revolves around responsibilities. You become incredibly efficient at managing obligations, but you lose connection with yourself. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual. And that's why so many women don't even realize it's happening. They just know they're tired. They know they're overwhelmed. They know something feels off. And one of the biggest signs that your life is out of alignment is that you constantly feel like you're sacrificing one important area for another. You feel guilty when you're working. You feel guilty when you're not working. You feel guilty for taking time for yourself. And you feel guilty for not doing more. No matter what you choose, it feels like something else is suffering. And that's exhausting. Because guilt becomes the soundtrack of your life. I've had this conversation with women who feel guilty taking a lunch break. That used to be me. guilty taking a vacation, guilty leaving work on time, guilty saying no, guilty asking for help, guilty resting. Think about that for a moment. We've reached a point where many women feel guilty for meeting their basic human needs. And then we wonder why burnout is so common. The truth is, burnout rarely happens because you're incapable. It happens because you've been carrying too much for too long without replenishing yourself. You cannot continuously pour from an empty cup. You cannot lead effectively when you're running on fumes. You cannot create sustainable success while neglecting your own well-being. And that's why wellness must become part of the conversation. Not after success, not once life slows down, now. One of the biggest myths in leadership is that self-care is selfish. I want to change that belief. Imagine a leader who is exhausted, overwhelmed, reactive, stressed, and emotionally depleted. Now imagine a leader who is rested, grounded, focused, emotionally aware, and energized. Which leader would you rather work with? Which leader is more effective? Which leader creates a healthier environment? The answer is obvious. Your wellness is not separate from your leadership. Your wellness supports your leadership. And the same is true for every other area of your life. When your relationships are strong, you feel supported. When you're growing personally, you feel inspired. When you create space for joy, you feel energized. When your wellness is prioritized, your capacity expands. Everything is connected. That's integration. But here's where many women struggle. They know these things matter. They understand the importance of wellness. They understand the value of relationships. And they understand the need for boundaries. Yet they still don't make changes. Why? Because they tell themselves a story. The story sounds something like this. I'll focus on myself after this busy season. I'll slow down once this project is done. I'll prioritize my health after things settle down. I'll make time for what matters later. But here's what I've learned. Later is one of the most dangerous words to use because later keeps moving. There's always another project, another responsibility, another deadline, another opportunity, another reason to postpone yourself. And if you're always waiting for life to calm down before taking care of yourself, you'll spend years waiting. The women who create sustainable success, they don't wait for perfect circumstances. They make intentional choices within their current reality. They stop asking, how can I do everything? And start asking, what matters most right now? And that question changes everything. Because integration isn't about fitting more into your life. It's about becoming more intentional about what already belongs there. And that requires courage. It requires letting go of expectations. It requires disappointing some people. It requires recognizing that your worth isn't determined by how much you accomplish. That's a difficult lesson for many high-achieving women because we've spent years proving ourselves. We've spent years striving. We've spent years believing that more is always better. More achievement, more responsibility, more productivity, more success. But eventually we reach a point where we realize that more isn't always the answer. Sometimes the answer is alignment. Sometimes the answer is simplicity. Sometimes the answer is creating space. Space to think. Space to rest. Space to breathe. Space to reconnect with yourself. Because when you're constantly moving, you don't hear your own voice. You hear everyone else's expectations. You hear everyone else's opinions, everyone else's demands. But you lose touch with what you actually need. And one of the most powerful things you can do is create enough space to hear yourself again. To ask, what do I want? What matters to me? What kind of life am I trying to build? And perhaps the most important question of all, if I continue living exactly as I am today, will I become the woman I want to be? That question stopped me in my tracks when I first asked it. Because success isn't just about where you're going. It's about who you're becoming along the way. And if the journey is costing you your peace, your health, your relationships, and your sense of self, then something needs to change. Not because you failed, but because you deserve a version of success that supports your well-being instead of destroying it. And that is exactly what an integrated life makes possible. So if you're listening right now and thinking, okay, I understand what integration is, but how do I actually create it? Let's talk about that. Because awareness is important, but awareness alone doesn't create change. Action creates change. And the good news is that creating an integrated life doesn't require a complete overhaul overnight. In fact, I would argue that that's the wrong approach. Many ambitious women hear conversations like this and immediately think they need to reinvent everything. They decide they need a new routine, a new schedule, a new job, a new morning ritual, a new planner, and a completely different life. Then they become overwhelmed by the size of the change and end up doing nothing. Instead, I want you to think about integration as a series of intentional shifts. Small decisions that create a big impact over time. The first strategy is something I talk about often because it's the foundation for everything else. Know your values. I know I've already mentioned this, but it's worth repeating. Your values are your compass. They help you navigate decisions, opportunities, challenges, and priorities. Without values, life feels reactive. But with values, life becomes intentional. Think about it. When a new opportunity comes your way, how do you decide whether to say yes? When someone asks for your time, how do you determine whether to give it? And when you're setting goals, how do you know which ones actually matter? Your values answer those questions. One of the reasons so many women feel overwhelmed is because they're saying yes to things that don't align with what matters most. They're pursuing goals that they don't actually want. They're meeting expectations they never consciously chose. And every time you say yes to something that is misaligned, you're spending energy that could have been invested elsewhere. So here's a question I want you to reflect on. If someone observed your calendar for the next month, would they be able to identify your values? Or would your schedule tell a different story? That's a powerful question. Because many of us say that wellness matters, that family matters, that growth matters, that relationships matter. But our calendars reveal where our energy is actually going. Now, the goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. Now, the second strategy is boundaries. Now, I know boundaries are not always a popular topic, especially for women, because many of us have been conditioned to prioritize everyone else's needs before our own. We've learned to be helpful, accommodating, reliable, available. And while those qualities can be strengths, they become problematic when they come from self-sacrifice. A boundary is simply a limit that protects what matters most. That's it. A boundary is not punishment. It's not rejection. It's not selfish. It's protection. Think about the things you value most. Your health, your family, your energy, your goals, your peace. Without boundaries, those things become vulnerable to everyone else's priorities. Every time you say yes to something, you're making a decision about where your time and energy will go. And because both time and energy are limited resources, every yes requires a no somewhere else. And that's why boundaries matter so much. I often tell clients that saying no is not the difficult part. Trusting yourself after you say no, that's the difficult part. Because that's when guilt shows up. That's when doubt appears. That's when you wonder if you're disappointing someone. But here's what I've learned. Every healthy boundary initially disappoints someone who benefited from your lack of boundaries. I'll say that again because it's important. Every healthy boundary initially disappoints someone who benefited from your lack of boundaries. That doesn't mean the boundary is wrong. It means the relationship is adjusting. And that's okay. Now, the third strategy is managing your energy, not just your time. This is one of the biggest shifts I made personally. For years, I focused almost entirely on time management. How could I be more productive? How could I fit more into my day? How could I become more efficient? But eventually I realized something. Time isn't the only resource that matters. Energy matters too. You can have time available and still not have the energy to use it effectively. You know this feeling. You've probably experienced it before. You finally get an hour to yourself. You sit down to work on something important, and your brain feels exhausted. You're mentally depleted, emotionally drained, completely out of gas. The issue isn't time. The issue is energy. That's why an integrated life includes practices that replenish you. Sleep, movement, nutrition, rest, connection, joy, reflection. These aren't rewards for being productive. They're requirements for sustainable success. The most effective leaders understand this. They recognize that their energy influences every interaction they have, every decision they make, every challenge they navigate, every conversation they lead. When your energy is low, everything feels harder. But when your energy is strong, your capacity expands. Now, the fourth strategy is intentional planning. Notice I didn't say filling every minute of your calendar. I said intentional planning. There is a difference. Many women create schedules that have absolutely no room for real life. Every hour is accounted for. Every minute is assigned. Then something unexpected happens, as it always does, and the entire plan falls apart. An integrated life requires flexibility. Life is not predictable. People get sick. Meetings run long. Opportunities arise. Challenges appear. That's normal. Instead of planning every minute, focus on planning your priorities. Ask yourself, what are the most important things I need to accomplish this week? What supports my goals? What supports my wellness? What supports my relationships? What supports the person I'm becoming? When you plan around your priorities, rather than perfection, you create room for life to happen. And perhaps the most important strategy of all is regular reflection. The most successful women I know don't simply move from one goal to the next. They pause, they reflect, they evaluate, they learn. Because awareness creates growth. At the end of each week, I encourage you to ask yourself, what went well? What felt aligned? What drained me? What energized me? What do I want to do differently next week? These questions seem simple, but over time, they become incredibly powerful. Because reflection prevents you from living on autopilot. It keeps you connected to yourself. And when you're connected to yourself, you're far more likely to create a life that feels aligned, rather than simply impressive. That's what we're aiming for. Not a life that looks good from the outside. A life that feels good from the inside. A life where success and wellness coexist. A life where leadership and authenticity work together. A life where ambition doesn't require self-sacrifice. A life that reflects your values, your priorities, your vision, your definition of success. Because at the end of the day, that's what integration is really about. It's about building a life that feels like yours. So as we begin to wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with one final thought. Your life is happening right now. Not when you reach the next goal, not after the next promotion, not after the next project, not when things finally slow down. Right now. And I think that's something many ambitious women forget. We're so focused on what's next that we miss what's now. We're constantly looking toward the future, the next achievement, the next milestone, the next accomplishment. And while there's nothing wrong with ambition, there's something dangerous about postponing your life until you achieve more. Because if you're always waiting for the next thing, you'll never fully experience the present thing. I know because I lived it. For years, I believed happiness was waiting on the other side of achievement. I believed fulfillment would arrive once I accomplished enough, once I reached the next goal, the next level, once I proved myself, once I became successful enough. But every time I reached a goal, another one appeared. Every time I achieved something, the finish line moved. And eventually I realized something important. Success is not a destination. It's an experience. It's not something you arrive at one day. It's something you create intentionally along the way. And that realization changed everything for me. Because instead of asking, what do I need to accomplish next? I started asking, how do I want my life to feel? That question is so powerful. How do I want my life to feel? Not how do I want it to look? Not what do I want people to think? Not what achievements do I want on my resume? How do I want my life to feel? Do I want to feel energized, peaceful, purposeful, connected, present, confident, fulfilled? Because when you start designing your life around those feelings, your decisions begin to change. You stop chasing things that don't align. You start prioritizing what truly matters. You become more intentional with your time, more protective of your energy, more aligned with your values, and ultimately, more connected to yourself. That's what an integrated life creates. Not perfection, not a flawless schedule, not a life without challenges. An integrated life creates alignment. It creates peace. Now, before we finish today's episode, I want to walk you through a simple reflection exercise. And I know this is a long one, so thank you for being here, but this part is so important. If you're driving, you can simply listen. If you're walking, maybe think of your answers. And if you're somewhere you can write them down, I encourage you to do that. Let's take a moment together. So take a deep breath and ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how aligned does my life feel right now? Not how successful, not how productive, how aligned. And if your answer isn't a 10, that's okay. The goal isn't judgment. The goal is awareness. Now ask yourself, which area of my life currently feels most aligned? Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your wellness. Maybe it's your personal growth. Celebrate that. Acknowledge what's working. Now ask yourself, which area feels least aligned? Where do you feel tension? Where do you feel frustration? Where do you feel disconnected from the life you want to create? Now, don't avoid the answer. Lean into it, because awareness is where change begins. Next question. What have I been tolerating that no longer serves me? That's a powerful one. Maybe it's overcommitment. Maybe it's people pleasing. Maybe it's constant busyness. Maybe it's unrealistic expectations. Maybe it's negative self-talk. What have you been tolerating that no longer belongs in the next version of your life? Now ask yourself, what is one small change I could make this week that would create greater alignment? Notice I said 1, not 10, not 20, 1. Because sustainable transformation happens through consistent action. Maybe it's setting a boundary. Maybe it's scheduling a workout. Maybe it's taking a lunch break. Maybe it's saying no to something that drains your energy. Maybe it's spending intentional time with someone you love. Maybe it's creating space for rest. What is one action that would move you closer to the life you want? And finally, ask yourself this. If I fully believed that success and well-being could coexist, what would I do differently? Take a moment with that question. Because for many women, That's the belief that changes everything. The belief that you don't have to sacrifice yourself to succeed. The belief that ambition and wellness can work together. The belief that leadership doesn't require burnout. The belief that you can create a version of success that feels powerful, peaceful, and aligned. That belief is the foundation of everything I do at Empower Elle. Because I truly believe women deserve more than survival. You deserve more than constantly holding everything together. You deserve more than running on empty. You deserve a life that reflects your values. A life that supports your well-being. A life that allows you to pursue meaningful goals without losing yourself in the process. And while that journey won't happen overnight, it absolutely can happen. One choice at a time, one boundary at a time, one aligned decision at a time, one intentional step at a time. So as you move through this week, I want to leave you with a challenge. Take 15 minutes, just 15. Find a quiet space, grab a journal, and answer this question. What does an integrated life look like for me? Not for your friends, not for your coworkers, not for society, for you. Describe it, visualize it, write about it. How do you spend your time? How do you feel? What are your priorities? What boundaries exist? What does success look like? What does wellness look like? Who are you becoming? Because the clearer your vision becomes, the easier it is to start building it. And remember, you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to take the next aligned step. That's where transformation begins. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope this conversation gave you permission to redefine success, reconnect with your values, and remember that you don't have to choose between ambition and well-being. You're capable of creating both. So keep choosing yourself, your vision, and your values. That is real power. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning into the Empower Elle podcast. I hope today's episode inspired you and gave you practical insights to help you navigate your journey as an ambitious, high-achieving woman. Remember, every step you take towards building your confidence and embracing your full potential is a step closer to creating the life you truly desire. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. Your support helps us reach more women who are ready to step into their power and live their best lives. Don't forget to join our community on social media for more resources, tips, and inspiration. Until next time, lead with power and live with wellness. You are unstoppable.